In this section of the textbook, we're looking at bad graphs. And so what we want to be able to do is look at a graph and understand how statistics is maybe being abused, or is it misleading us in some way. So we'll look at some things that we can examine to help us figure out how is it misleading. So graphs can be misleading because of inappropriate use of scale. Maybe they're going up by 100s when they really should go up by 5s. Or maybe the axis doesn't begin at 0. And so one axis might begin at 0 and another doesn't, and so the differences between the values are exaggerated. Sometimes graphs are just outright missing numbers, or the use of pictographs is really common for publications because they are visually appealing. However, the use of three-dimensional objects in a graph can exaggerate the area or volume of the objects and make it seem like it's increasing more rapidly than it really is. When we see a survey, look very closely at the choice of the sample. Is it a voluntary response sample? Look at the question phrasing. Are they using loaded questions? Also, look at, are they using making statements about cause and effect when something is shown to be correlated, because correlation never proves cause and effect. And then look at self-interest studies. Are they deliberately distorting the information out of self-interest? So here's an example of use of a non-zero axis and how it can be very misleading. The first graph is misleading because it appears that twice as many people favor blue if you look at the height of the bar graph as compared to the other graphs. However, the vertical axis, if you look, begins at 20. The second graph is more accurate. When we redo the graph and make the axis on the y-axis begin at 0, we can see more accurately a comparison of the favorite colors of the people that were surveyed. When we look at graphs, be sure to analyze the numerical information given in the graph. So actually look at the x-axis numbers and the y-axis numbers instead of being confused by just the general shape of the graph. So when we look at a cube, look at the cube on the left, the small one, and the one on the right, the bigger one. If we double the length, width, and height of the cube, what happens is the volume increases 8-fold. So we're only doubling, however, visually it's increasing 8-fold. This pictograph is misleading. Again, we're using pictures, and so the millions of tons of trash are going from 80 to 160. So that's increasing by twice as much. However, if we look at the volume of the trash cans, that's the problem, is the area and the whole volume is also increasing visually, and so it's misleading us. And here's an example where the choice of a sample can be misleading. In 1936, Literary Digest magazine sent more than 10 million ballots to readers to get their preferences in the upcoming presidential election between Franklin D. Roosevelt and Alfred M. Landon. The returns indicated that Landon, the Republican nominee, would win handily. However, history shows us that Roosevelt won in the first great landslide election of the 20th century. He carried all of the states except Maine and Vermont. And so here, the choice of the sample, since Literary Digest just polled their readers to get their preferences, that's going to create bias because it's not a good sample of the general American population. So apparently, their particular readers were all in favor of Landon, which was the Republican nominee, so maybe Literary Digest magazine is a very conservative or Republican publication, and so therefore that would bias their results.